Fridays, everyone. Okay, let's start again. Welcome to FemTech Fridays, everyone. Today we were joined by Elena Rueda, co-founder and CEO of Dama Health, and Dr. Erin Lazorwitz, Dama Health's medical director and an associate professor of obstetrics, gynecology, and reproductive sciences at Yale School of Medicine. Dama Health is working to make personalized prescribing and patient-centered care the standard in women's health by focusing on translating clinical research and evidence into practical education that empowers both clinicians and patients to make better decisions. Elena Rueda has a master's in business administration from the Imperial Business School in London and worked for several years bringing healthcare innovations to market at Merck before she founded Dama Health. And Dr. Lazarowitz's clinical and research work focuses on reproductive health, hormonal contraception, pharmacology, and why patients can experience the same hormonal treatments very differently. Elena and Dr. Lazarowitz, welcome, and thank you guys so much for joining us. This is such a special session because we get to welcome two guests. Normally we only have one, so I'm really thrilled that you're both here, and I know that we're going to learn so much from you today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Great. Okay, so we're going to start with Dama Health's origin story, which is something that I am so interested in. So, Elena, we're going to start with you. You wrote it, in a LinkedIn post for this talk that you first reached out to Dr. Lazorwitz by cold email about his pharmacogenetics and contraception study, which led to a pivotal call and ultimately the founding of Dama Health. So what sparked your interest in pharmacogenetics and contraception in the first place?
Yes. So, I think the origin story really started off at university when I was speaking to a lot of women. I lived with 6 different women at university, and everyone was sort of experiencing different things with their contraception. I think university is always a time when women kind of have experiences like trying something new or switching. And I was really interested at the time. I did my thesis in epigenetics. And so I started digging more and more into pharmacogenetics and seeing, okay, we know there's quite a bit of research out there around how your genetics could impact the way you metabolize other types of medication and drugs. I was curious, is there something or underlying genetics? Could that be why, out of the 6 women that I was living with, we were actually, majority were on the same pill. We were all experiencing different things. So just started doing more and more research on the topic. I studied medical sciences in my undergraduate, so I was always on PubMed. And that's really where I found Aaron's research. He was ultimately one of the only researchers and pioneers in the space of pharmacogenomics and pharmacogenetics of contraception. So I reached out. I was very interested in seeing, okay, how is it that we're really prescribing these medications without going deeper, doing more tests or more analysis? Could there be a way that we could really get to a more personalized and precision medicine approach? And ultimately, Aaron's I think studies at the time were recruiting for like 900 patients to do a study. So I was like, okay, I need to hear more about where the science is at, and how far are we from really being able to bring this into clinic. So Aaron jumped on a call. We got talking. I was very enthusiastic about kind of solving the problem at a clinical business level. So I think we both really related with that, as Aaron is part-time researcher, part-time gynecologist. He saw all ends of the spectrum in terms of kind of the patient experience, but then was also seeing what was going on with his research. So I think that's kind of, I was between my undergraduate degree and my master's, and it really changed kind of the direction of my career when I did meet Aaron, and we bonded over the topic. Maybe Aaron wants to speak more as well on the topic himself.
Yeah, oh my gosh, what a story. And prior to reaching out to Aaron, I know you spoke with your college friends about their experiences, but had you mentioned any of your research to providers before reaching out to Aaron, or Had you talked to anybody in the medical community formally about that?
I think I was mainly hadn't talked to any like physicians or researchers. I think Aaron was the first person I
Wow.
actually spoke to. So I got really lucky. I think it's just one of those
Yes.
things that serendipitously, you meet the right person at the right time. And for me, Aaron was that. But then years later, I worked at Merck. And so I did start doing a lot more digging from a commercial perspective, speaking to kind of researchers and professionals in the pharmaceutical space. But ultimately, yeah, I hadn't actually spoken to any physician or any researcher prior.
Wow, Erin, you must have made quite the impression. That's incredible. So Erin, before we kind of talk about this pivotal email, can you give us just like a brief background about the extensive research that you've already done in pharmacogenetics and within the women's health space?
Yeah, so I started this work back during my fellowship, so my latter half of my training, where, I learned about the field of pharmacogenomics and how, other areas of medicine were using genetic variation and genetic data to guide prescription practices, and it made me question why don't we do that in the contraceptive field or in women's health in general, and really found this gap. And so my fellowship project was to conduct the first pharmacogenomic study with contraception. And so it was an ambitious project of recruiting 350 contraceptive implant users. And it was a candidate gene study. So we picked out the genetic variants that we thought were going to be most important based on what we know about genetics and know about hormones, and see, are those the variants that affect what's going on, affect the drug levels, affect the side effects. The things that Elaine has mentioned are very different from person to person. Unfortunately, we didn't find what I expected, but it did highlight that we just need a lot more data in this field. And so that led to then the bigger project Elena kind of briefly mentioned of increasing that to 900 implant users, taking a more genome-wide approach. And then that also has fed into the research I'm doing now, which is translating that research over into oral contraceptive pill users, who are really the majority of contraceptive users in the US and really worldwide using hormonal contraception. So kind of bridging it over. But so still doing a lot of the foundational work that I'm very hopeful that others can build upon in the future, because we've still got a long ways to go in terms of solving this problem, but we've got to start somewhere. And so that's kind of how I got interested in the field.
Wow. Was there a reason why you chose an implant over an oral medication to start with?
Yes, so the implant, from a pharmacological perspective, is the ideal drug for research, because once it's in. Doesn't, the patient doesn't have to do anything. You don't have to worry about them missing a pill, something happening. It's in there, it's releasing the drug based on the what we know from the manufacturer. It's got a nice steady release that changes a little bit over time, but after the first year, it's nice and a steady amount. And so on paper, right, it should theoretically give the same amount of drug to every person if they're using it at the same amount of time. And so then that makes it easy. You can measure the drug levels and know exactly what's going on with that patient. And you can see that there's huge differences from patient to patient. So it was just from a logistical research perspective, it was the best method to start with.
Great. Great. Okay, so you read this email from Elena, you had
Yep.
this call, and then so what ultimately convinced you to transition your research into a business with
Yeah.
Elena? And
Yeah. So as you know, there's the common quote, common saying that like research takes about 10 years to get into actual clinical practice, right? And that is far too slow, right? And so,
agreed.
I knew from the get-go that if I wanted to get this into patients' hands to actually affect clinical care, partnering with industry was really the way to achieve that in a much more expedited fashion. And so really, Elena approached me right as we had finished the initial candidate gene study, the kind of the first hormonal contraceptive pharmacogenomic study to come out. Um, and she kind of caught me at a great point in my career where I was still at the University of Colorado, still doing the next steps of the research. And I was like, I need to get this into people's hands faster. And, I'd love to partner with a women-led, woman-owned company to do that because, right, that's who this is mostly going to affect. And that's where the care is going to be given. And, I could tell Elena's passion from the first time we talked and just the mission that she had in mind. And it just made the most sense of there's no reason not to work with industry. And I talk to all my, residents and fellows and teach them of like, industry's not the bad guy. Industry, we need industry to get things done. And it's better to work with them and help along that mission, right? So that you can make sure that it's strong evidence, it's good care that's eventually going to make it into people's hands. And so that was really the driving force that I was like, yeah, this is worth my time, worth the commitment, if it gets any of this research into patients' hands faster.
Oh, so wonderful. Okay, so Elena, for someone hearing about Dama Health for the first time, can you briefly describe what Dama Health offers? We'll dive deeper into the product features and how they work more in detail through the conversation, but just kind of at a high level in case this is the first time someone is learning about your amazing company.
Yes, of course. So Dama Health essentially is a women's health company startup that focuses on bringing more precision and personalized medicine to the way that hormone therapies are prescribed. We not only work on the research, as Aaron mentioned, the company is now also doing its own research in the field. We then translate that into clinical decision support tools and software and technology that can be applied in clinical practice. So we right now have basically kind of two products. We have the Dama Health platform, which is essentially a personalized recommendation engine that can help doctors to personalize anything from your contraception to your HRT for menopause. This has been built really from the foundation up with kind of all of our medical board, our research, to be able to understand how different variables impact different endpoints, and we essentially have consolidated all of that. And it's just ever growing, right? This algorithm is like the moment, we have new research coming through, we understand that there's a new biomarker, a new predictor. That is really essentially the goal of the business, to be able to be, we've built kind of the ground for it. And now we're adding more and more information to the way that we can then kind of support doctors to prescribe these medications. And then we also have a women's health co-pilot, which is essentially like your open evidence for women's health. If any doctors are on this call, we know that AI and clinical AI can be quite biased when it comes to helping and surfacing women's health related questions or research. And so what our team also focuses on is actually building consensus documents and information, and essentially really like building the guardrails and testing it so that it's actually safe and more accurate and more up to date for women's health prescribing. So we are a B2B company. We don't go direct to consumer. We don't have tests or anything that we offer to the patient, but patients can access our recommendations through the clinics that we work with. So we work with hospitals, clinics, telehealth, essentially.
Wow, thank you. Amazing. Okay, so to piggyback off of that question, precision medicine aims to tailor treatments to the individual rather than using this one-size-fits-all approach, which we all know is so important in every field of medicine. But can you briefly explain what precision medicine means and why Dama Health chose contraceptive hormone therapy as its lead indication?
Yeah, so I guess precision medicine is essentially using a patient's biology, whether that's their genetics, their blood biomarkers, their metabolic profile, their clinical phenotype, their end goals, and really being able to take all these input variables and assess to be able to then predict likelihood of how a therapy is going to react, how they're going to do on it, and really move away from being able to just take the average prescribing for everyone and then essentially adjust afterwards. So really moving away from that approach. In order to get there, as Aaron said, fundamentally, there just hasn't been a lot of research done in hormone treatments and contraception or HRT. And I think for us as a company, it's one of the most commonly prescribed drugs to women across the world. And so we were like, there's so much diversity in terms of response. There's so much diversity in the population that is taking this medication. So fundamentally, it was just a very interesting starting point for us. And as Aaron said, right, because of the way that there's different methods, there's different ways you can take and absorb the drug. There's patches, there's rings, there's implants. There was just so much variation in terms of being able to really consolidate all of these findings and just create better ways of prescribing them for the population and for women.
And your data points are significant. You have or deep. You have 150 data points for your individuals. Can you kind of tell us about that? Kind of expand on what the traditional, I guess, patient assessment may have missed before Dama Health that you are now capturing.
Yes. Do you want to answer that, Aaron? Do you want me?
Sure. I'm happy to chime. Yeah, I'll chime in and you fill in anything I miss. So yeah, I mean, I think the biggest gaps we were trying to cover with the tool is the really the personal goals and desires and prior experience, right? And those are some of the most difficult things to quantify during a clinical visit with a patient, right? Is that, discussing contraceptive options, it's a wide berth of options. And, most patient visits are 20 minutes still in the US. And so how are you going to cover all that information in such a short visit? So the tool was designed to basically get you to the ideally matched options that were going to work with this patient better sooner, so you can start talking about that sooner during the actual visit. And so asking about, what are your goals for this contraception? Is it to prevent pregnancy, or is it to help with your periods? What's more important? How do you feel about devices? What are you concerned about? Really those preferences that are sometimes hard to get out of a patient, or the patient may not even know how necessarily to express it at that time, right? And so that was the goal of the 150 data points, was to get as much information about that patient's experience, their intentions, what they wanted, and match them as close as we can to the potential methods out there, so that we kind of avoid the traditional patient comes in, wants birth control, the provider's rushed, going to the next patient, like, oh, why don't I'll write you a script for a pill, try it, we'll see how it goes. It's like, well, let's do better. If we get more information ahead of time, then we can cater this of like, oh, I see you don't really want a pill. You want something more reliable that you don't have to worry about. Let's talk about an implant, or let's talk about an IUD today, right? Like, let's get to that conversation faster. So that, again, that precision medicine, right? It's all about getting to the patient faster and less of that trial and error nonsense, right?
Listening and mutual decision making, huh?
Yes,
That's incredible.
exactly.
Okay, so Aaron, from a clinical perspective, why can two patients using the same hormonal therapy have vastly different experiences?
So the why is the question, because it's a matter of figuring it out. I strongly feel like genetics is a important part of that, because of what we know in other areas of medicine, because of how we are as humans. We know there's rampant variation in our genetics. Some of it does nothing, but some of it obviously affects us in who we are, how we react to things, and specifically how we react to drugs. Even though I said, that my first trials didn't show what I wanted, like the golden target of this explains everything, we still found at least one good genetic target in a metabolic enzyme called CYP3A7 that some individuals continue to make as adults and some don't. And those who make it then have an extra enzyme that breaks down steroid hormones. And so their drug levels are lower, their response is likely different. And so that's kind of the things we're looking for, that to help explain these variations, right? In that some of it has to do with the amount of drug that the person's getting into their body and then how they react to that. And then some of it has to do with how that drug then reacts in the various parts of their body, right? These drugs don't just only go to the ovaries, only go to where we want them, right? They go everywhere. They interact with everything. Why do patients sometimes get terrible mood symptoms with the same method that another patient's actually, now their mood's better? I've seen both. You've probably seen both. Many people in the audience have probably experienced this. Part of it has to do with some variation in the tissues where the drug's going, whether that's differences in the receptors or differences in other proteins in the body and how they're interacting. The whole field of omics is not just genes. It's also the, metabolomics, the different proteins in our body and how they interact with the things that are acting in us, transcriptomics and epigenetics. There's so many different omics out there, all with the intention of trying to explain this difference. And that's really the goal, is to figure out, you really have to, it takes time, it takes research, it takes a lot of initiative and, patient investment to try to figure out what are those real individual differences that are affecting this outcome. And like I said, we're just touching the iceberg of this, the tip of it, of figuring out these things, because, for so long, it was just ignored, right? It was just the sentiment of, well, it happens to some people, it sucks, try a different pill or try something else. And it's like, no, we should really try to figure out what's going on, the why of this, because we don't know right now.
That's a great answer. And you explained the results or the surprise results of your first study, but can you expand on any other results of your other studies? I think I had seen somewhere that you were finding that some individuals have differences in weight gain or potentially mood. Is there something briefly you can talk about on that?
Yeah. So the weight gain's a fascinating one as well, is that for the longest time, it's always been a controversy of, does hormonal contraception cause weight gain, right? And besides the injection, the depot shot, which we know causes weight gain, the rest of the methods, it's like, well, not really. The good studies we have show, everybody gains weight over time as we get older, and it doesn't seem to really affect it that much. But there are still individuals who do gain a lot of weight with the contraceptive methods. And so with with the original study of 350 implant users, there was a variant in the estrogen receptor gene that was associated with more weight gain. Unfortunately, I'll give kind of a preview. That paper's coming out hopefully soon. That association was not still significant when we went to the 900 implant users of the bigger study. So unfortunately, and this happens in genetic research all the time. You find something that looks like it's real, but you need to duplicate it and validate it, because false positives show up all the time. And so, unfortunately, that is no longer a good explanation. And so, kind of back to the drawing board of figure out what's going on with this. And same with mood changes. I've yet to find a good genetic target that explains mood changes, probably because mood changes are really hard to assess. And I'll freely admit, in my first studies, the goal was not really to do as good of an assessment of mood changes, just because, we're collecting all this information, we're drawing blood, the patients are doing surveys, you kind of limit it, and you don't want to over inundate everybody. But for my new study going on now, that is a much bigger focus of what, especially with birth control pills, mood symptoms are a really big focus of attention and can cause a lot of issues. So we're doing a much more nuanced assessment of mood symptoms so that we can hopefully get some more information about that.
Great. So as we're talking, we are getting some comments on menopause and whether the Dama Health platform and technology is going to be helpful for that. We kind of had structured that later in the talk, but do you want to jump there since there's some interest now?
Sure.
Can you tell us, we had kind of hoped to talk about where the future is going, and it sounds like people really want to know right now, like, menopause is so significant right now in the research world and the innovation world. So Dama Health started with this hormonal contraception lead indication, but you are now more transitioning into hormonal therapy. Can you expand on that, Erin, and kind of help the users get excited like I am?
Yeah, I'll let Elena take the point on this.
Oh, great.
Sure. Yeah. So exactly, like through Dama Health now, our recommendation engines, one of the most popular and most asked questions when we were in clinic was, can you help? Can you do this as well for HRT, for perimenopause and menopause, since it's clinically one of the areas where a lot of physicians just have not had a lot of training in. And so absolutely, now Dama Health, you can partner with us and we can give you our recommendations on the best HRT for your patient. We can identify that. Again, we have I don't think it's 150 variables actually for HRT. It's slightly a different number, but we've used the exact same approach and the learnings that we had for contraception. And then also our co-pilot, Dama Assist, is used clinically for the number one use of Dama Assist is actually asking clinicians asking it about perimenopause and menopause. So it is, it's, as you mentioned, rightly so, there's still so much nuance. The guidelines take a long time to update. There's new research coming out, and really our aim as a company is to be able to make sure that the most evidence-based information is present when the doctor is making this decision with the patient, but also that they have the right resources, the right information in front of them so they can have these conversations, because patients are just as, confused, as lost. There's just not a lot of information about even identifying signs of perimenopause. So you could definitely, if you are a clinician, you can try Dama Assist and see how it supports you with perimenopause and menopause cases. And over time, we will probably, as a company, start doing pharmacogenetic research on HRT as well. Essentially, HRT is a lower dose of hormone. So actually, we've started with contraception because it was a little bit easier for us to actually see clinical and pharmacokinetic results from that could then be translated into HRT. But absolutely, that's where the research as a company is going towards.
Great. And I'm glad that you transitioned us into the Dama Assist. And I think this next audience question might help us might help us get more information about this piece of your technology. So
Sure.
so can you tell us about your Dama Assist? The audience question was that you're collecting all of these data points from your patients. Is that information that's collected from a patient then analyzed in order to provide best care strategies? And is that what Dama Assist functions as?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, our recommendation engine sits outside of Dama Assist, because Dama Assist is not a medical device. It is there for information, research, and similar to open evidence and a clinical co-pilot. If you want to be able to work with us to be able to get the clinical decision support, that we do in different structures. So working with the clinics and integrating, basically with the right agreements and commercial agreements where we absorb the clinical data, and we basically give clinical SOAP notes and recommendation, as well as education that fits the SOAP note. So the clinician can also use that as a template to educate the patient at the appointment. Over time, I think there is a world where, we're seeing that there is a lot more automation happening in the clinics. So being able to kind of merge the two. But right now they are two different products. One is used direct and requires a physician in the loop to be able to assess those results and then be able to make the clinical decision. Dama Assist is really there to be able to ask it anything from, can my patient take this supplement at the same time as their HRT? What is the latest evidence around breast cancer risk in HRT? It's really to be able to bring all the nuances of women's healthcare and surface that to the physician. And where the guidelines may not touch those topics, we have our own expert guides, clinical consensus documents that actually fill those gaps, which is really where Dama Assist has been able to perform a lot better in women's healthcare than other AI clinical tools out there.
Great. And Erin, from a clinician side, have you had any feedback from clinicians that have used Dama Health to help with their decision making?
Yeah. So, so far the response has been extremely positive. And, a lot of our biggest users are those often nurse practitioners in women's health who are really facing the brunt of this ask for menopause care, right? They're doing a lot of the primary women's health care in this country as everybody becomes more specialized, more surgically focused in our field. And so these, providers who didn't get great menopause training, I can tell you, no one gets great menopause training, right?
Yes.
Even us physicians, we did not get great menopause training. So now they're being asked, a huge demand in this country, which is rightfully so, of being like, this is an important problem. We need to help take care of the women entering perimenopause and menopause. And so they have really found Dama Assist to be a reliable guidance in just doing safe care, right? Doing evidence-based safe care. Dama Assist is fed only with pure, the guidelines, the evidence, and then, as Elena mentioned, these expert consensus guidelines we're putting together with our medical board, where there are gaps, and there's so many gaps in menopause care. Same thing as with contraceptive care. It's been largely ignored as a field of precision medicine, where it's like, well, just give them a patch and move on, right? And so that's really, where Dama has kind of answered the call of the populace of saying, hey, this is a really important issue. And so Dama is very well positioned to translate what we were doing in contraceptive into the menopause space and directly start helping. And so that's kind of what we've seen with the users so far is they really feel like they can be more confident in assessing patients for perimenopause and in just making sure they're doing the safe and right thing when they start menopausal management therapy.
Great. So, we've talked about AI, its pros and cons. We've heard both of you say that shared decision making is so important on the platform and to your clinicians. What should a clinician do if the tool's output conflicts with their impressions or the patient preferences?
I mean, I think the first thing is look at the citations, right? All AI tools, well, I can't say all, but most should have citations. Ours definitely does. Dama Assist tells you where it's pulling the information from. If something seems fishy, something's like, I don't wait, that's weird. Where is that coming from? Go to the source, right? I've done this the same with like Chat GPT when Google gives you the automatic answer or whatever, and you go and you're like, well, that's not what that says at all, right? Not calling any AIs out, but we've all had that experience. And so I always encourage, and we always also encourage users to give us feedback, right? If something comes out that's like, whoa, this is weird, I'm not sure about this, right now our users are heavily engaged in giving us direct feedback that then we can respond to and investigate. And sometimes it's something they weren't aware about, right? Something they just hadn't heard yet, hadn't experienced, or some new evidence that we're compiling into the tool, and they just weren't aware of that. And then, of course, there's a little, or just misunderstandings of things, right? It's so we work closely with our users and welcome their feedback, and the feedback is read every day and directly related to, and it. All of these AI tools are works in progress, right? They're never perfect because the evidence is always changing, and so we are always engaged with our users and want their feedback to just continue to make it better.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so Dama Health, that you started as more of a research-oriented platform, and now you've kind of shifted to bringing research into the clinic so that we can use it, so that we are moving away from this 10 to 15 year gap of research to actual clinical practice. Can you expand on that and kind of was there an aha moment that you had from going from your research to working with your colleagues and saying, oh my gosh, like this needs to come out faster?
Yeah. Elena, I think did you want to add something?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, I mean, I didn't, it was to the prior question, but and I'll
Yes.
jump back in. It was also just to say that two things that we do a little bit differently as well as part of the AI stuff is we do have a medical board of gynecologists and women's health experts that are constantly training and testing, which is very difficult to do when you are like a generic AI tool. So being able to have like a dedicated team. But also one thing we've trained the platform to do is surface the amount of evidence level. So if there's little evidence, to really be able to like say that and not just like hallucinate and like kind of fill the gaps, but say there, I don't have enough information, I cannot answer this question. So that's like something that we're very strict about, so that there isn't an answer for the sake of the answer. And there's a couple more things that we do, but just to kind of emphasize that because we're so specialized, it just means that there is like always a team of humans behind the loop. Whereas when you get really big as a company and very generic, that becomes very difficult. You end up not being able to have like an oncology team and a cardiology team and immunology team, right? Like constantly testing this, like the silos of where the tools are operating and giving you answers under. So yeah, yeah. Sorry, we can go back to your question.
No. I mean, this is incredible because you're really building trust, which is so important when you're using any kind of innovation in healthcare. Because, I think most healthcare professionals are a little hesitant, maybe at first, to adopt, and so it's really welcome. It's really welcoming to hear that you care so much about that feedback. So with respect to kind of the evidence that you're using, one of our participants asked, do you utilize evidence specifically about bioidentical MHT, or is the recommendation engine still rooted in extrapolation of outdated non-physiologic MHT formulations?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. And we work across the board with physicians who are in insurance-based hospital systems, all the way to kind of private, longevity, functional. Like we do have quite a variety of users. So Dama is able to give you the evidence base beyond just the guidelines, like really surface that, and it is quite modern in terms of the way that it can respond. So it won't, if there is enough evidence to be able to answer the question accordingly. You can ask it questions about bioidentical. You can, and it will, it does have knowledge around that. I think the one thing that we always recommend is just being able to give that extra context. Like, I am a physician that operates under this environment, and it is actually able to contextualize the answer even better for you. So we know there's just some physicians that, they just need to follow the guidelines. That's how they need to operate in their clinical practice. There's also physicians that are able to do a lot more biomarker testing, and, they're doing lifestyle medicine on top. And it is actually, it is pretty good at being able to support both ends of that spectrum. But yeah, we are evidence-based first and foremost, really. If there's data out there, if there's research out there, it does surface that for you. But it is not quoting outdated studies that have now been validated to be claiming falsely and causing fear in the way that hormone therapy should be prescribing. And yeah, that's the most important thing that we're trying to kind of communicate here as well. There's still so many biases, and that even like in the clinical community is still kind of we're trying to kind of get by. So yeah, and we do have a 2 weeks free trial for anyone to try, really no cost at all for anyone. So really encourage people to just see if this works for them, and it helps them. And again, give us feedback. We'd love to keep improving it.
Erin, I'm going to kind of shift our question based on how we've gone. But so you both have spoken so highly about the evidence that you use, and you're very interested in continuing research. And you're part of your platform is to help with research planning and to collaborate. Can you expand on that for anyone that's interested in potentially working with you from a research side?
Yeah, and myself and Dama included, we are incredibly passionate about continuing research, both in the contraceptive and menopause space, right? Because again, it's the same drugs being used in different forms across the spaces. So there's a lot of crosstalk, there's a lot of applicability that can go across the both fields. And so the approach we've taken is that I am continuing my academic pure research as part of my, as my position at Yale, while Dama is pursuing more innovative and collaborative research. They've done research with Illumina, and now, we partnered with an ARPA-funded project with focus on a completely different disease state, endometriosis. But Dama is passionate about utilizing our research expertise within the company to help any precision and personalized medicine in women's health, right? And so, we continue to put in grant submissions, based around contraceptive and menopause care, to work together on this problem and welcome collaboration with anyone who's interested, right? That is, we need data from all the sources to advance the field, because the biobanks of the world just don't collect good data on women's health and these issues. And so we have to do it ourselves. And so, from an academic perspective, I love to work with people, love to collaborate on things. And so I'm always happy to talk with anybody if they've got ideas or projects. And then from a Dama perspective, like the clinicians we work with, the patients we work with, we find them to be personally investing their time into the company. And we want to respect that and use that to help them personally and then help people in the future, right? And I can tell you, all the women I've worked with in research, that's kind of the most important reason they want to contribute to the research, is because they know it may not necessarily help them in the end, right? But if they can make a woman's care better in the future and avoid the issues maybe they had, that is very important to them, and it's incredibly important to us.
Oh, that's so great to hear. So, as Dama Health is growing, what are the outcome measures that you're tracking, and how are you measuring whether you're successful or not? And either one of you can answer this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's different criteria for the different parts of the business. So research has its own different outputs. Maybe Erin can speak on that behalf, and I can speak on more the commercial. But I think measuring things like patient adherence, patient satisfaction, decision making at point of care. How are we supporting the clinician, reducing time and mental burden there? So there's a lot of different areas that we measure, but mainly it's really patient-centered care as much as possible, getting to the right state faster, whatever that state is defined. And we also right now, Dama Assist, like our AI co-pilot, is being trialed in numerous different systems. So we will be kind of publishing some papers out of that to be able to show more of that objectivity. We've given the tool to groups of gynecologists, primary care doctors, nurses, to be able to really show that it can support different types of healthcare professionals as well. Because not only is it being able to support with personalized prescribing, I think there is still a big educational gap that we're also trying to solve. And as you mentioned, like clinical AI is in the workplace, it's there to stay. It's just increasing year on year in the clinical community. And we want to make sure that the tools that are being used are not continuing, they're not like basically continuing the same biases that the women's health and medical space has had in the past, and amplifying that. So really we have a mission to also be able to play a role there.
Yeah, and from a research perspective, a big output, a big goal is creation of useful biobanks for future omics research, right? So I'm creating my own biobank from the academic research, and Dama Health is making their own biobank. And really with the goal collecting these really what we call nuanced phenotypes of side effects, satisfaction rates, and patient experiences that aren't captured in electronic medical records and aren't available in other biobanks, so that we can then pair that with the genetic data and other omics data in the future, so that we have big enough.
Erin, you may have froze on my end. I don't know on anyone else's, but we may have missed that last sentence that you said.
Oh, sorry. I was just hopefully to get big enough biobanks that we can actually answer the questions of what are the omics and individual variations that can be clinically useful in the future, right? They could actually turn into clinical practice. And you need, unfortunately, tens of thousands of people to really prove that. And so Dama and myself are both trying to, work together to create biobanks to help answer those questions.
That's great. And so we only have a couple minutes left, which is so crazy. I feel like we need a part two of this. Okay, so we have another audience question. Maybe we'll shoot to that. Is anyone researching endocrine impacts on MHT hormonal restoration, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, Elena, I'm trying to think of.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is, yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's a clear area of knowledge gap, I feel like. And like, same as with contraception, people have just not really studied the personalized and precision medicine of menopause hormonal treatment. And so, this question comes up as a lot as well of like, oh, should I just measure my patient's blood levels, right? Of certain hormones, right? And then we can use that to guide prescription. And we always have to tell people there's no data on how to use that information, right? Like it's so nebulous in terms of, how they actually guide practice, especially prior to utilizing those hormonal treatments, right? What does a patient's baseline endocrinological and hormonal milieu actually predict for the response? We have no idea. That's another question Dama is really hoping to answer in the future, and we've put together grant proposals on that question, and something we are really passionate about answering as well.
Okay, so we definitely have to have part two. I mean, we need to follow up on this question. So Elena, maybe we and Erin, maybe we can just rapid fire on a couple last ones that we try and do consistently with our FemTech lives. So we work within a university and we're trying to empower the next generation. So Elena, for students who want to turn a passion for women's health into a career, what practical advice do you have about taking brave steps like you took, sending that cold outreach email to get noticed and start working in this space?
I would probably just say be bold and be curious, right? Like I think I was interested in a topic. I did my research. I started just trying to find the right people. And I think I've always been very curious person, like whether it's I need to learn more about a topic, I'm going to go to a webinar, I'm going to attend a networking event. I think ultimately this has led me down the path that I am in now. I met my co-founders, Dr. Aaron Lazorwitz and Paulina, and I think it wouldn't have, and it was all remote. Like this all happened during COVID, and like we set up the company remotely. So I think there's a huge power of network and just being curious and going out there. It's easier now than ever, because everyone is connected online to find those people. But definitely don't be shy. The more questions you ask, I think the closer you get to finding like kind of the people that you're meant to kind of work with or potentially partner with. And if it's not now, it could be later, right? But like opening that door early is, you never know where it could lead down the line. So definitely don't be shy and don't wait until the right moment, because there is no right moment.
Great advice. So, Aaron, when you're teaching your medical students
Yeah.
curiosity and networking, we've heard from Elena. What else do you tell your medical students who are interested in making impact outside of a clinical setting?
Yeah. I mean, kind of going back to one of the first things we talked about, don't be afraid of industry, right? I feel like industry gets a bad name in our medical training as like the people who are just trying to make money and they're going to try to abuse you and like give you bad advice. It's like, well, no, industry pushes the field forward with the right partners, right? Like, so just be open to conversations, you know, keep an eye on your email, right? Keep an eye at meetings, make connections, as Elena said, and like, you never know, right? When a good partner is going to come around that can actually help in what you're passionate about. And I also tell med students, if you want to do something crazy and new, do it. That's the only way we get to push the field forward, is if we start, trying crazy ideas. When I was doing pharmacogenomics for the first time, everybody in my field was like, what the hell is that? Why are you doing that? And it's like, because we need to. Somebody's got to start it. I'm not going to finish it, but at least I'll start it and then hopefully inspire some other people to take on that, the reins in the future. And so, yeah, I think those are the two big things of just like be open to collaborations wherever they come in and don't be afraid of crazy ideas.
I'm inspired. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, and for both of you, for everybody that's interested in staying connected with you, for keeping up with what Dama Health is doing, for keeping a pulse on research, what's the best way to stay connected, and are there ways that we can help you?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. You can find us on LinkedIn and Instagram. We also have a monthly newsletter that we push out like the latest women's health research, objective research out there. So that's also available and you can find it on our website. But yeah, I think connect with Aaron and myself on LinkedIn as well. We'd love to, if you're working on the field or interested in anything, yeah, we always answer messages. So because you never know who the next partner might be.
Yeah. Yeah, my email is public. It's just first dot last name at yale.edu. You feel free to email me. And yeah, all the Dama updates are fantastic. And then yeah, my research updates come out on the Yale website all the time. So lots of ways to connect with us, and we're always open to talking to people.
Thank you both so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I really wish we had the rest of the day to continue to learn from you guys, and hope that we do schedule a round two in the future to see how you've progressed. And thank you everybody for listening in. This has been wonderful. Please keep an eye on our program, and we hope that you join for our next session with our next guest. Have a wonderful day, and thank you again, Elena and Aaron. This has been inspiring.
Thank you, Lauren. Likewise.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye,
It's been such a pleasure.
everybody.
Yeah.